to get started, I'm going to introduce each one of you, and then we get to go into questions and just a really beautiful conversation. So, all right, introducing Dr. Summer. She specializes in trauma resolution with somatic healing, reparenting, and nervous system regulation. Dr. Summer is passionate about helping people heal trauma and empower themselves at the deepest level. Dr. Summer, thank you for being here. It's really exciting. And then we have Gabriella Taylor. She is a relationship specialist, an ordained minister, and the founder of Extraordinary Love, where she offers transformational programs for women, combining modern psychology, neuroscience, and ancient spiritual principles. So welcome, Gabriella. Thank you. And Lindsay Marten Ellis. Lindsay is an embodied, intuitive, somatic healer, spiritual teacher, and speaker, and human design guide. Her life's work is devoted to empowering those who identify as women to transform from the inside out through a body-based approach. So welcome, Lindsay. And Heidi. Heidi Day is in her 20 years as a coach. She has come to be known affectionately as the Soul Healer, and she's had the privilege of supporting over 400 women to clarify their purpose and gain emotional freedom. Welcome, Heidi, and welcome all of you. Thank you for being here. This is just incredible. So much wisdom here right now. So thank you. And to get started, Dr. Summer, would you be able to share with everybody what is somatic healing to kind of ground this conversation and why it's so important in our lives?
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much for having me. It's so nice to be with all of you here. Yeah, this is for me, my doctorate is in physical therapy. And so after 20 years of being in the healing and therapy world, this is really what it's led me to, what I feel like is really missing in a lot of trauma healing is somatic therapy and reparenting and nervous system regulation. And somatic therapy is a bottom-up approach, whereas talk therapy is a top-down approach. So it's looks at the connection of the mind and body. And so it looks at both psychotherapy and physical therapies for holistic healing, and also includes talk therapy. Like, I don't know about all the rest of you that are somatic therapists here, like in my work, yes, we're doing the mind body exercises and other, physical techniques to release tension that negatively affect our well-being, but we're also still, tuning in with that person and doing talk therapy. And so it's somatic therapy is so good for, all kinds of trauma related issues and abuse and stress and anxiety and grief and addictions and relationship problems and all of that stuff. And it's, something that can be used one-on-one as well as group therapy settings, and especially good for those that have been suffering from chronic pain, chronic physical pain and digestive disorders, and other like traditional medical issues where traditional, remedies weren't effective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And can you share a bit more about like a specific example to ground how, like, the difference in contrast with other forms of therapy and how powerful somatic healing can be, and why it's important to integrate back into the body?
Yeah. And, the overarching theme of most of my work is nervous system regulation and applying, everyone's like, yeah, applying, applying polyvagal theory. And, I think any practitioner that's been, working with clients for a long time, you just realize that the trauma is in the body and you can only talk about it so much, and so, with my particular work, it's, I use it in a way that, helps people that especially have been in, chronic dysregulation and freeze responses and dissociation, and teaching them how to, I call it embody more of their higher self, but like pull more and more of their energy, power, and spirit into their body, because that's where their energy and spirit into their body, because that's where their power lies. And in my particular work, I use, really helping people guide them into their emotional sensations and into their physical sensations and into their inner child, where we can really work on reprogramming the subconscious mind and the limiting beliefs that, most of us formed at a very, very young age, and kind of creating this havoc in our lives because we're running, the wounded inner child is running the show. And so I see it as like very connected, the wounded inner child and the nervous system dysregulation and your ability to stay present in the body or not, is like, it's so all intertwined that whenever I started really moving all of my work to focus on these three things, it's like, it's where I just see the most impact and the most sustainable healing for people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for sharing all that, Dr. Summer. It really, I feel like that everybody now gets a better idea of the impact of this kind of modality, and well, umbrella modality with many little more modalities underneath it. And I'd love to ask Gabriella if you could share about why, even though someone may understand their issues with their mind, how there can still be a struggle with them.
Oh my gosh, that is one of my most favorite questions ever. And picking up where Dr. Summer just beautifully, set up the stage, it's because these things, they don't live in our mind, or rather they have to go through these intricate neural streams, these things meaning challenges, traumas we went through that got embedded in us, scary experiences where we were abandoned or we felt unsupported, whatever they are. They first go in through our autonomic nervous system and then travel up through our brainstem, through our subcortical process into the part of the brain that we have conscious awareness of. All of that to say, there is so much material in these neural streams in our belly brain, in our heart brain, in our skull brain, in our autonomic nervous system that hold on to the visceral implicit memory of the thing. So if we're trying to go in, like Dr. Summer was saying, from the top down to attend to something that lives in our brainstem, where there's no strong neural pathways, it's just not effective. And, God bless modern psychology. Like, we are evolving out of everything that I was trained at when I got my master's in psychology. Now, I've been doing this since the 90s. We're just disproving, but it's a beautiful thing because it's the evolution of, I even look at it from the big picture perspective of how this planet desperately is yearning for the mother to be remembered. And the mother to me is the body of the earth, the body of ourselves, how we treat ourselves, the body of how we care and treat for one another. And when I look at a lot of the how Western psychology has been formed, it was through a lot of beautifully well-intentioned white men, 100 years ago, that didn't really have a connection to the mother, the body. And so I find that all of us women that are gathered here looking at, wait, we can't talk ourselves out of our pain. We can't convince ourselves it's not real. We have to attend to where it actually is inhabiting our space, and it's woven into our cellular matrix, our autonomic nervous system response, our brain. And then from there, we can affect change by attending to. So, and I love this theory. So, or not this theory, this conversation. And I love that we're all bringing it forward more and more.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And yes, thank you for bringing that, like the mother connection, because it's at the root of so much disconnection from ourselves.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, pointing to the root. And Heidi, you've supported a lot of successful leaders, and you've seen how common it is for people to use their success to regulate themselves. Can you talk a bit about this?
Yes. And again, so happy to be here. I'm like loving you all. You all are my people. It's amazing to be able to be in a space and it's like, yes, you get it. So I too have a background in behavioral health, and I'm a psychiatrist and therapist. And I knew very early on, like in the 90s, that this wasn't the space for me. I knew that. And so my mom was like, well, what is? I'm like, I don't know, but it's not this. Like, I'm very clear about that. And the truth of the matter is, women that have attempted to be in that space of trying to outperform their pain through their success, it's just an attempt. So there are many different coping mechanisms. And in my world, what I firmly believe is that traumas happen on a continuum, right? So how I define trauma is any negative experience that changes how you see yourself and how you walk through the world, right? Just very, very simply. And so there are these big T's and there are the little T's. And wherever you're falling on that continuum, those experiences absolutely do live in your body. And so what happens is, for so many of us as children, it's like, oh, you got straight A's? Amazing. That's great, Cindy. You're fantastic. So then all of the happy chemicals said, yes, yes, yes. Right. We have all of the things, the dopamine, everything is pinging at that time. And at a very early age, we learn to perform our way out of our pain. So mommy was upset with me before, but I got good grades. I got on the cheer team. I did whatever. And so we began to correlate the feeling good with my doing good, and not understanding that it's what I call it is America's dirty little secret. Because when you are doing more and more, and you're getting all of the accolades and all of the trinkets and trophies for your success, and it's kind of like this loop where it feels good until it doesn't. And the only thing that we know how to do is to do more things, to get more followers, to grow, our business, to get another degree so that we can feel good again. Not realizing that it is a very vicious cycle. It's a very vicious cycle, but our culture says, wow, you're amazing. You're like, how do you do it all? I can't believe, like, you have your kids, you sit on boards, you have your business. Wow. And so we believe that we just continue doing the same thing over and over again, but we find ourselves burnt out. We find ourselves with, as Dr. Summer said, with chronic pain that we can't figure out, and our doctors are telling us that we're crazy. We find ourselves exhausted and overwhelmed and adrenal fatigue and all of these different pieces. And it's like, hey, let's stop the rat race and get to the root of it, because essentially our beliefs, absolutely, yes, Lindsay, we are wearing busy as a badge of honor, like, yes, not realizing that it's a part of our trauma, right? And so for me, it is like, we get to understand that our beliefs create the container in which we live, and our beliefs come from those experiences, and they happen on this very wide continuum. So it's helping to disrupt that pattern. For me, it's very like, we get to disrupt what you know and who you've been, and then decide, who do I get to be? In our space, we call it the divine ideal. What is your divine blueprint of health, of wellness, and of authenticity in who you really want to be, not what you want to do?
Mm-hmm. And would you say, like, could you share a little more of how you've seen women manage to heal this addiction to success or accomplishment and still create the beautiful things that they want to create in the world?
Right, because so many clients come and they're like, but if I don't do it this way, can I still do it? Can I still have success? Can I still be seen and really have the idea of myself? And because it's very scary to reimagine who you are. So it begins, like G.I. Joe says, knowing is the half of the battle. When you can recognize, this is the problem. The thing that I thought was the solution actually is the problem. It is in the doing and not in the being. So first, helping them to realize that. Secondly, really dialing into these beliefs, and these beliefs are living in your body. So when we start dealing with it, and it's like, oh, I'm having all of these issues in my shoulders, or I'm having issues in my belly, and then kind of understanding, okay, this is a sensation that I'm having, this is what I'm feeling, let's dig a little bit deeper. And so often when we dig into that, we realize that the body's security system at some point, either in this life or other lives, has been violated. Like, there is some violation that has happened, and beginning to do that work and helping them to really dial into the wisdom of the body, because our body absolutely hold the secret. And so that's kind of the work that I'm asking people to do. And it's funny when you're talking to like a PhD in engineering, and I'm like, okay, I want you to go with them. They're like, you want me to do what? And I'm like, just let's talk about this. Let's dial in. And what I realize is you haven't been home. Your body is your home and you haven't been there. You have essentially been walking through life homeless. And so really helping, who is this? Lindsay, yes. Girl, I have 2 PhD engineers right now, and it is just really interesting working with them because it's a different conversation when you're asking people to go to places that they haven't been. And many people just have not been in their bodies. And so that is the beginning of asking them just to kind of tune in and to recognize what you're feeling, what you're sensing, and to give themselves permission to be there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Gabriella, is there anything you want to add to that about changing these limiting beliefs?
Oh gosh, there's so much I would like to add, but let's see what wants to come through
Like
now.
in a few words.
Yeah. In a few words, I would say, I think the biggest, so much of what underscores my work and what I am here for is to make it okay to have limiting beliefs and to discover a way to create internal safety to work with the limiting beliefs. Because I find that there can be, and guilty of it for decades in my own practice, I was constantly trying to talk clients out of their limiting beliefs or talk myself out of my limiting beliefs. And yet 20 years later, they're still there until I went back into the field of interpersonal neurobiology and had the privilege of training under Steve Porges and Deb Dana and polyvagal theory, until I really got that limiting beliefs live inside of these neural nets that are literally constructed in our brain, and they are submerged, these neural nets that hold limiting beliefs, they're actually submerged with this extrasynaptic GABA, it's basically these beliefs are held in goo, so that way they're sort of below the level of conscious awareness, so we can walk around and not be crazy all the time. But then when we get triggered, the neural net rises, the extrasynaptic GABA parts, and then we have a trigger. But we can actually work with the neural net to reshape it. So my point of saying that is that the intelligence that created us, the intelligence that created how these limiting beliefs get implicitly encoded inside through a traumatic experience, through whatever it is that embeds as trauma, the intelligence that goes into it is profound into creating it, as is the intelligence and care that's needed for undoing it. And the undoing it or the reshaping it, to me, 100% has to accompany a feeling of safety, a feeling of companionship, like I'm not alone doing this, a feeling of I can go at my own pace, like there's no hurry here, a feeling of acceptance and welcoming to be where we're at instead of perpetuating subconscious self-rejection, because very often we're in such a hurry to get out of our pain, to get rid of our limiting beliefs, that it's actually perpetuating self-rejection, where we're wanting to push away from that which is alive in us. So to me, the journey of being curious, of being compassionate, of having accompaniment, like these are the things that allow us to our system to actually open and resculpt and reshape. And then these limiting beliefs that might live inside as I'm alone, or, life is scary, or people out to get me, they can be transformed from, like we're talking about, from the bottom up, instead of just a mental process to attempt to talk ourselves out of them. They literally get resculpted the more we come together in a field of safety and in the field of like, well, is it really true now? And let's explore, what the wisdom inside, or what the loving mother inside, or, the wise one inside would offer to us, the one inside that's trapped in this limiting belief. Like what is really true? How can we invite ourselves into living into a new possibility? But it's so nuanced and it's very gentle, instead of just rushing in, trying to cut off the belief and replace it with a new one. So it's like, it's a relationship that we have with these parts of ourselves that hold these limiting beliefs.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, and really taking a moment to honor the protector, right? Because it's kept us safe. It's helped us survive. Like we get to honor it, and by honoring it, there is a new relationship that's formed that starts creating the safety in order for it to be healed and be really changed into something else. But through its own will versus forcing, which is the other paradigm of
Yeah.
just like bulldozing, moving through, blah, blah, blah. But actually like, oh, let's actually experience this together in a safe container where it can be rewired and repatterned. So.
And I want to advocate that plowing through, there's a purpose for that, right? Like, I think sometimes we're getting a little shifted in our culture where now there's so much like, oh, that's bad. And it's like, oh, that approach is fantastic for some things. But when it comes to tending to our broken hearts, or the parts of us that are scared or feel deeply alone, that's often never the approach. I have never seen it work. And so to me, there's like a wisdom in discerning, oh, where is it helpful to like go gangbusters ahead? And then where do we need to yield and be with? And we're all learning that in our own lives right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. And Lindsay, so we've talked a bit about somatics and processing emotion in the body and addiction to success and accomplishment. And I'm curious if you could share about nervous system regulation and also the power of breath and how that relates.
Absolutely. Well, I'm just laughing because I am a former engineer. I wish I had this container, this community. I went through all of my transformation and this healing journey, which then turned into a massive spiritual evolution alone. I felt alone often. So I just want to thank you for putting this together and having us all weave the golden threads together, right? This is where we're all student and teacher. And so everything to me comes back to wholeness. And I love how all of the speakers touched on that, right? There's a program that's nobody's fault. It's a societal conditioning that leads us to believe that we are broken, that we need to be saved, that we are not whole. And what it's doing is it's pulling us further and further and further away from the truth of who we are. And I love, I have the science brain. So I love to have a solid foundation, but what I've noticed is it always comes back to presence, right? So we have the animal brain, which learns through association and repetition, not the ability to critically think, right? So I love that we're going to do shaking later, right? We see the zebra meets the lion. After that experience happens, what happens? The zebra shakes it out. The zebra is no longer worried about, is the lion going to be here? I see it with my dog all the time when a dog comes off the leash and I'm still having PTSD from it, on the lookout, right? Because my brain is thinking about what happened in the past. And so that's what I started to do, because with the human brain, we have this ability to evolve, right? This technology, we have all of this amazing technology and resources and this brilliant mind. Yet what are we constantly doing? We're worried about the future or we are reliving the past. And so many of you have probably heard of the vagus nerve. Obviously, we have other, panelists here, and that's at the core of what I do, because when I started to learn, this is another conditioning, that the mind is king. And this is where I say the body is queen. And through the vagus nerve, which we hear, what is a deep belly breath, where we're connecting to the center of the vagus nerve, that, mind you, for women, goes through our cervix as well and connects all the way up through all of these organs, right, in our body to the cranium. The majority of the time is telling the brain what to do. And then the brain comes back down and delivers. And so once I learned this piece of information, wait a second, the body is communicating to us in so many ways. Right? Our eyes are just the simple gesture of closing our eyes. Think about the miracle of our eyes and looking around. Is this safe? Is this not safe? Should I go here? Should I not go here? And so the simple gesture of recognizing, okay, when I connect to the breath in this way, I connect to the vagus nerve. I'm telling my body that I'm safe. I'm connecting to the present moment. And when we're in the present moment, what are we doing? We're releasing all the feel-good hormones, the ones not that Heidi was talking about, the ones that matter. The love hormone, not the conditional love, the unconditional resonance that, again, Dr. Summer was talking about too. This is how we access our higher self. This is how we access the messages. And so I just want to close with, I think we overcomplicate it, that it needs to be this big practice that we do. And the simple practice of knowing, okay, I can connect to the breath. The first thing we did when we entered this world, the last thing we'll do when we leave this earth plane, to connect to the present moment, which is always truth. When we're in the past or the future, that's when we're in story, right? That's when we're in an emotional charge. That's when we're generally in a trauma-based response. And so that simple practice has absolutely shifted my life. And it's allowed me to heal through the body in a way at quantum speeds. And I'm bringing all the women with me. Back to you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And yeah, to summarize it, it's really becoming aware, getting present through the breath, and just really coming back to presence. It's as simple as that. So really allowing ourselves to slow and feel and be. It's like, okay.
Would it be okay if I added a gem to that, what Lindsay perfectly set up? Because I find it so important. And again, because I've shamed myself for a long time for not being able to do that. And I've witnessed how many women have set before me in my practice also, like, why is it so hard? And recognizing that our autonomic nervous system is the first line of entry that life enters our experience through. It's kind of like the surveillance system, the guard at the gate. And it is always tracking through this amazing process called neuroception, which is happening below the level of conscious awareness 4 times a second, right? 4 times a second, tracking for cues of safety or cues of threat. And it might be through voice tone. It feels threatening, someone's voice tone, or too much light in a room, or the feelings in the body, something's tightening up inside. Like the ways that we have a neuroception of threat are myriad, and they don't make sense necessarily, because this is the inborn survival response that's simply in service to our survival. Am I safe or am I in danger? And then based on the cues that we're getting and how our neuroception is receiving it, we're either going to be in a dysregulated state of sympathetic fight or flight, like get me the heck out of here, or screw you, I'm coming after you. Or we're going to collapse into a dorsal vagal state of like I just want to disappear, hold our breath, freeze, that's where that lives. And so to me, it's so important to remember that if we are dysregulated in a fight or flight or freeze response, the path to getting up to what Lindsay was beautifully saying, to this ventral vagal state of well-being, being able to be in the present moment, often comes from even understanding our own nervous system in our inner landscape. And I say this because it was groundbreaking for me to discover that getting in the present moment, or being in the present moment, actually, I had to go through my body and my nervous system. And if my nervous system was dysregulated, I had to find a regulating resource. Maybe it was just looking into a beautiful face like one of yours and just connecting with the warmth of eyes. Maybe it was through having a hug or cuddling with my kitties or just sitting under a tree. But when we're able to regulate our nervous system, which puts us in that ventral vagal, God bless the vagus nerve response, then we're actually able to be present. And so I just say this, especially as an early yogini. I mean, I went through years of yoga training, and man, I had such a huge trauma history. I could not be present for the life of me. And so, but then it was like, what's wrong with me? And so that's why I feel it's so important with the dispelling of shame for us all to realize, oh, if we are in if our body is perceiving threat, whether it's there or not, by attending to that first, then we can regulate, and then we're able to be present. And it's such a beautiful gift that we give to ourselves, learning the language of our nervous system, because it's shifting all day, every day, but we get hijacked by certain states. My home away from home is sympathetic for sure. For others, it might be dorsal, like I just want to get out of here and hide. So to me, bringing this in, it's such an act of self-care to understand how our system responds to life. So that was what I wanted to add on to what Lindsay beautifully shared.
Thank you for adding, Gabriella. And I'm curious, Dr. Summer, if you'd like to add in as well, and maybe with a twist on reparenting. And you're muted.
The thing I always like to add with the nervous system piece, because I find over and over again, it just takes a lot of self-criticism and self-blame away and self-judgment away, whenever people really get that our nervous system responds automatically, autonomically, subconsciously, without the rational mind. And so because I just have met so many people over the years that they get so hard on themselves on like, oh my God, like, why haven't I healed this yet? Like, I've done so much freaking work. Like, why is this still coming up for me? And they have a lot of shame around it, or they beat themselves up about it. And so I'm like, if you could just let that land, that like, it's not like your nervous system's actually just doing its job. And what you respond to as threat is dependent on your specific past trauma and past imprints. And that might be different than mine. And so just really letting that land, and that also that our physiological state precedes our story. And so depending on, what level of regulation we're in, depends on how we feel and how we behave. And so especially for those that just are absolutely stuck in the mind and they can't get away from the story, and they're stuck in the trauma loops, and it's just this vicious cycle. It's just like really getting them to understand, like, if you can just begin to shift your attention away, from the loops and the negative mind, and into your body, and beginning to tend to your body and make the regulation of your nervous system like number one priority. Because if you do have like a healthy functioning vagus nerve, if you are, in a regulated state, a ventral vagal state, it's the only place that we're even able to recognize, or I should say access, curiosity and compassion, for ourselves. And, when we're in states of dysregulation for so long, it's curiosity is replaced with like defensiveness and hypervigilance. And, we can't access compassion for ourselves, and we're just seeing negativity and worst case scenario. And so, I love having people that have, been in trauma for so long, because we're so oriented to negativity, to just like begin to orient yourself on a daily basis to things that feel good and are like gratitude and smelling a flower or like a beautiful sunset. And Deb Dana, who's an educator of the polyvagal theory, she calls it savoring. And she's like, research shows if you can savor a moment of goodness, that feels, good in the body, then that continually can give the body these ventral vagal imprints, or these imprints of like calm, present state. And then your question on, what was the piece about reparenting?
If you wanted to sprinkle in a few more bits of wisdom on reparenting, it feels like a good moment.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, for me, like, I'm somebody who like, I half-assed inner child work for many years. And then when it kind of like came down to it, and I went through a fairly shocking, painful, traumatic divorce in 2020, and it sort of spiraled me into the core wound of abandonment. And, I'm a really well-resourced woman, and, I've been in the healing and therapy world for many years, and it was so emotionally intense. Like it feels like, if any of you have experienced the abandonment wound, it feels, very much like death and starvation to the system, because if we were abandoned as a child, we would die. So biologically, like, that's what it feels like when we experience it as an adult. It's incredibly intense. And I got kind of like, I had this realization when I was sort of just like in that wound, where I was like, wow, it actually doesn't even matter who's sitting across from me, like listening to me or saying whatever to me. No one's going to be able to take away this pain. And I'm the only one that's going to be able to do that. And it just made me focus on, I was like, I could feel how young I felt in my grieving. And I was like, I'm the only one that is going to be able to do this. And so many times a day for like 6 months straight, I just was like reassuring and updating and parenting, my little girl, which through that process, I realized like, there's this unfusing process that happens of unfusing your present day woman from the wounded little girl, and for those of you, this is why I do what I do, because those of you trying to unwind a trauma bond or, deep patterns of codependency, like, we just need support, like, in that type of, because it's so difficult. It's so painful. And what happens with the whole reparenting process, what's needed, I should say, in the whole reparenting process is is such a level of authenticity and precision, I kind of want to say, in that where you meet that little girl, because for some people, they can't jump straight into a reparenting process because there's actually repair that needs to happen between them and their, little girl, because there's been so many years or so many decades of self-abandonment. And so what I say is like the consistency with reparenting work is really, really important, because that little girl inside is always listening and always watching, and she needs to see that your actions are going to match your words, that you're going to be congruent, that she sees over time that you're going to be reliable, so that the sense of trust is developed. And for somebody that worked on my mistrust issues towards the masculine and my mistrust issues towards the feminine and all this stuff for so many years, when it hit me like a ton of bricks, where I was like, oh, I feel mistrust because my little girl doesn't trust me, because I've been like betraying or ignoring or abandoning her for so long. And so whenever I really like developed that sweet connection, and she like to where she trusts me so much, it just really, it was the only time I felt a felt sense of trust in my body.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so powerful, and just the consistency and staying true to that actual reparenting bond, like really honoring it, that it's something that we're committed to versus, when like a wobbly parent.
Yeah.
So,
And I also should just say, like, there's no one that's a perfect parent, and
yeah.
so when you're doing this, to give yourself a lot of grace to
Yeah.
learn, because none of us were modeled like perfect parenting. And so it's a little bit of trial and error, and giving yourself a lot of patience and grace to learn how to sort of reach for this evolved way of parenting that we weren't really shown.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so before we close this panel, we're almost up on time. We get to have a Somatics fire round, which is basically going to be the same question for each of you, but you all get to share your different answers. So the question is, what's one tool or practice that you use to come back into your body and regulate your nervous system? And you can popcorn. Yeah.
I'll start, and it's one that that my teacher Deb Dana gave to me going through the polyvagal trainings. It's called it's really, she calls it the personal profile map, and it's a way of mapping out our different nervous system states in each of the 3 states, so we can get to know what's it like to be me when I'm in sympathetic fight or flight, what's it like to be me when I'm in dorsal freeze, and what's it like to be me when I'm in ventral vagal connection and regulation. And so if anyone were just to go online and Google, personal profile map, nervous system profile map, something along the lines, Deb Dana, and that you can walk through the process, to me, that is the easiest. I don't want to say easy, because sometimes it's hard to shift out of dysregulation, but it's such a brilliant way in, because absolutely, like our physiology dictates whatever our psychological narrative is. And so if we can attend to our physiology, if we can befriend our nervous system and get to know what are the things that set us off, what are the things that help us return to a sense of safety, and we develop this flexibility of being able to attend to, like, oh, I'm dysregulated right now. The barista looked at me in a weird way, and 2 hours later, I'm aware that I feel upset, and I don't know why. Like, if we can start to understand what the things are that our system perceives as a cue of threat, and then from there learn how to regulate ourselves or experience regulation with another, that is such a fast track through the psychological morass of feeling scared or alone, or all of this stuff. We can never feel safe, talk ourselves into feeling safe, if we're stuck in a dysregulated, I'm pointing just in terms of where the sympathetic nervous system chain sort of lives here, and then the dorsal vagal, the lower part of the vagal, is kind of closer to our belly. So if we're stuck here in our autonomic response, it's so hard, like it's virtually impossible to achieve a sense of mentalized safety. So that would be number one. Learn to befriend your nervous system and what helps you, what helps you regulate.
I'll go
For
next.
me,
Oh, were you
okay.
gonna, Heidi? I was just gonna piggyback off of that, Gabriella, because this is befriending the nervous system for me, right? It's like, okay, taking the deep breath, hands on body. What is the state? And then I put on music. I love that Debbie said music. So generally, I work with Dr. David Hopkins' map of consciousness. And in contraction, generally there's a massive grouping, which is fear, grief, shame. And that's generally when we're in a more depressed state. I actually put on a music that drops me into that state. So I put on resonances that drop me into that state so I can move through it, so I don't bypass it. So the emotion, the sensation can move through me. And then I elevate and I put on whatever jam I want that I know is going to elevate my frequency. If I'm in anxiousness, frustration, anger, I will put on a resonance that helps drop me in so that it can move through, because that's generally up higher, closer to, all of those higher resonances. And then I put on something else that generally actually is more calming, because my state was so like this that I want something a little bit more, just peaceful and serene. So I like simple, and music is one of the quickest ways that I'm able to drop in my body, meet the sensation, befriend my nervous system and meet the sensation. So I hope that supports you all.
Awesome. And I'm kind of in that same space. Oftentimes as business leaders, we talk about building know, like, and trust with our audience and with our prospects, but we fail to build it within ourselves. We don't know, like, and trust ourselves. And so when, all of us are having these conversations around our, like being regulated and being dysregulated. But for the average, sister that's walking around here, these may be new concepts. So on a real basic level, it is knowing, being able to stop and know yourself, know what you're feeling, know this trigger, this sensation, this vibration is connected to depression, or it is connected to grief, or it's connected to whatever, so that when we build that we have a knowing. So from the emotional intelligence piece, being able to label it, stop and label, this is it's not like I feel good or I bad. No, what is the feeling? Know it. And then building liking for yourself, like acceptance. Girl, you are what you are, and it is okay. And when we can really just have a piece of looking at that little girl that we were, because for many of us, we weren't affirmed, we weren't given, our stuff was so connected to performance that we just stop and say, you know what, just as you are, like, you are amazing. I keep a picture of my 7-year-old self on my desk. And whenever things are getting crazy, I just stop and I look at her and I'm like, girl, you're amazing. I like you just as you are, as is love. And then trust, for me, that's also very regulating, is coming down to, I am trusting what I know about myself. I don't have to have an external validation for it. I am just trusting my truth, that my truth is personal and it does not need to be validated through other people, that I can trust that. And building that know, like, and trust within myself is also what helps me to flourish in my relationship with my children, with my husband, and in my business. So really stopping and like, what do you need right now? Okay, you get to have it without judgment. And building that know, like, and trust every step of the way has been so profound for me.
I love that, Heidi. Thank you so much. I'll just add my 2 cents in, which is kind of a broad stroke on it, really, which is, to understand that whenever we're dysregulated, whether we're in fight or flight, I'll start here. In fight or flight, you got to discharge that sympathetic energy from the body. And we do that through movement, through breath, through sounding. And if you're in freeze, you got to discharge the sympathetic energy from the body. The same exact thing needs to happen. It's just a lot harder if you have gotten all the way to freeze, because it's like overcoming inertia, those of you that have been in a freeze response. So if you can catch yourself when just in the feeling states of the hyper aroused sympathetic system, just in your feeling states of fight or flight, which might look like anxiety or anger or elevated heart rate or agitation or stress, those beginning signs of just like, oh, I'm becoming dysregulated. The quicker you can acknowledge that, like, oh, I'm becoming dysregulated right now. oh, I need to discharge this sympathetic energy through my body, through my movement, through my breath, through my sounds. It's like you can choose your medicine, you can dance it out, you can shake it out, you can go for a walk, you can breathe and sound and sigh and hum and, yell and scream and all the things. But I usually sort of do a combination of all of that stuff. Like I will just be breathing and sounding it out and moving my body. And sometimes it's dance and sometimes it's for a walk, going for a walk, but it's about like identifying what you feel on the inside, what you're internally experiencing, and then expressing it on the outside. So if you're feeling anger or frustration, like letting yourself express that through your sounds and through your movement, and so when I was really in it, and I'll just speak to this for any of you guys that are just really, really in it right now, thanks, Sarah, that are super in it, like it's if you, because I just remember this moment when I was inside this abandonment wound, and it just felt like I was like, okay, I'm doing the things, I'm reparenting, I'm doing my breath work, I'm doing my meditation, like I need something to get me out of this trauma loop that I'm in. And I remember I was working with a therapist, and she says anything rhythmic can calm the limbic brain. So that can look like walking. That can look like, my favorite is swimming. Going mermaiding is my favorite. It's by far my favorite thing. And then if you, when I was also really in it, she said, buy a rocking chair. And I bought a rocking chair, and I would just like, it soothes the baby self. It soothes the infant self. And it, it's not a lot of, it's not physically hard, just to sit in a rocking chair and do that. So, or I'm on like an exercise ball right now, and you can also kind of rock on one of these things, so you can choose your medicine, but it's like, just remember, oh, if I'm feeling dysregulated in any way, I have to move that. I have to discharge and dispel that sympathetic energy through my body, through my breath, and through my sounds. And so you can really choose how you want to do that.
So powerful, each one of you. Thank you so much. And before we close, I know each of you have very generous gifts, and I'd love if you could share maybe in one sentence the name and the description of your gift, and our team will put the link of the panel gifts on the chat. So you'll see a link in the chat, and you'll also be getting an email right now as we start introducing the gifts. So yeah, go ahead and share. Also popcorn.
I'll just share mine is I think it's about a half hour somatic reparenting meditation. And so this is my method that I created after just a lot of integration and 20 years of being in the healing and therapy world. But it's similar to what I spoke to before, which is guiding people into their emotional sensations, where that lives in the body, and then connecting them to the inner child, and learning what the inner child's feeling, learning what the inner child needs, and this guidance of how to meet the needs, right? Like meet the unmet needs of the inner child, and even going so far as to like set up a regular check-in, like how often does this inner child need to be checked in with? How does she want to be checked in with? So it's sort of this step-by-step process, but it's a very embodied process to get you to connect to emotions, into the emotions that are in the body, and then into the inner child, so you can do the subconscious mind reprogramming.
I can share mine. So mine is more geared towards women that are seeking to call in a relationship, like a really beautiful, soulful, lasting relationship. So it's 5 ways to call in a emotionally available partner. And it weaves together, psychological principles, neurobiological principles, some quantum physics, and some spiritual principles. So it's just a really beautiful, to me, it's just a really beautiful take on looking at how do we prepare ourselves so we are available for the emotionally available partner, because that's an area where our culture in particular, like emotional literacy, emotional connection, emotional safety, like, oh my God, do we have a ways to go? And that the more that each one of us learn how to inhabit our emotional body and tend to our emotional body and communicate in a healthy way about it, then we're more likely and available to call in someone that matches us in that way. So that way we can experience more of the beautiful, flavor of human emotion. So I hope you enjoy it, if this is resonant for you, if you're looking for love.
Thank you, Gabriella. I'll go ahead and go. So mine is an assessment. It's a feminine archetype assessment. If you're curious about human design, I know it's all of a sudden becoming more popular, but a lot of it can be very mental. So if you're wanting to learn to allow, right, if this is more about the art of allowing the body to lead, allowing our energy that's unique to us to move through life. It's a 10-question quiz, and I give you practices to be able to start to embody your unique frequencies so that you can, get out of the imposter syndrome, right, the comparison game, and really start to live in that fullest expression of the truth of who you are.
So good. So my gift for you is kind of in that same space of being in a quiz. It is specifically for our female leaders that are out there that are wondering if your actions are furthering your success or sabotaging your success. And so often we don't know that to be the case. We don't know whether or not we are really landing in that. And so it's a self-care quiz specifically for leaders so that you can learn your type. All of us have a specific type, much like our love languages. We also have a self-care type, and what works for someone else is not going to work for you. And so when we try to adopt, like, oh, my friend said this was amazing, like breath work was life-giving. Well, that may not be your thing, sis. So if it's not, then really understanding what your type is so that you can do the kind of care that's going to resonate and really lift you into that space of what we in this space are calling our range of regulation. Like knowing what that looks like and knowing how you get it for you is the quiz that I have for you.
Love all of these. Okay, so we're going to put the link again on the chat. And I'm also going to share my gift to you is a 15-minute one-on-one call to discover the pattern that's holding you back and share a 5-step process to get you unstuck and back into the feminine flow and yumminess. So all these offers are in the chat and coming into your email right now as well. So, you have some space there. And click the links, download, do the thing, save your spot, and wiggle your bodies because we're almost approaching our next panel. So if you would like to share any last-minute things with the panelists, this is your moment. We have 7 minutes. If you would like to share any questions, anything at all, we're here, or we get to take this time to wiggle. Yeah. I see a lot of thank yous, a lot of gratitude. Okay, well, I don't see questions. We really covered a lot. Okay, there's one question. It's super hard to switch between the different states of the nervous system. How to make it more smooth? Yeah, if anyone wants to take that on.
I'm happy to begin with it or just to respond to it. Absolutely. Just to acknowledge it is hard, especially if there's these default states that we've sort of been habituated towards for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. So one, just giving ourselves the grace to go slow and to experiment with what does work, maybe to learn a little bit about what some of the options are. I loved how Dr. Summer just summarized 3 really simple ways to sort of give a frame around it, but explore what it is for you, but especially to be really gracious. And I find the intention around it is so important too. Like my intention is to meet myself where I'm at and to experience a greater sense of peace and connection, regulation, harmony. My intention is to love and accept myself just the way I am, even if I'm flipping the F out right now, and to calm down, come into connection and creativity, curiosity, compassion, all of that. So number 1, giving ourselves the grace to acknowledge that, yeah, it's a process. And 2, discover, exploring, what is it that works? Some things will work and some things won't work. So that's my 2 cents.
And reframing it, right? When we believe that it is hard, then we have that resistance, and what we resist persists. So what happens if we can just be gentle with ourselves, be it flow, and say, okay, I am going to be here in this space, and I'm going to give myself the grace, the gentleness, just as Gabriella was saying, to just kind of be present with it and allow, not to fight, because when we're fighting, then we're creating that resistance that keeps us wrapped up into it. And like being present of what's here now, let me name this, and where do I want to be? Because we have 6 seconds. We have 6 seconds, and from an emotional intelligence perspective, for those neurotransmitters to go all through our system. So we can choose. We don't choose our feelings, but we do get to choose our thoughts and how we're going to be with them.
And I think I'll just add briefly that, right, that just to, right, say it in a different way, like we're all saying it in a way, but there might be like one minute nugget is, right, coming whenever we attend to something from this place of there's somewhere to get to, it pulls us from presence. So just going into it, right, in that active surrender, right, of just like, right, as Gabrielle talked about the curiosity. So when we're trying to get somewhere else, we generally repel ourselves from getting, to that state that we're seeking and desiring to be in. So I hope that supports you. And I think also presencing that, I know all of us here that are panelists, this is an active practice. And I think normalizing that we all have our moments. Like I still have my moments with my husband where I'm like, ooh, okay, let's try that again, right? To normalize, as we all have said, that this is the response, is usually that emotional charge, and the presence is what helps us come back to that.
I'll just add a little piece to that. I love everything that all of you are saying. I'm sure this is so supportive to so many, is that like to understand that the goal is to like not ever have triggers again. Right? It's like, I think that's what we can think of, just like, I'm healed when I stop being triggered. And it's like, that's not, no, I think we'd be dead. Like if we it's like a healthy nervous system is a responsive nervous system, and so it's not that you're not ever going to have triggers again, but it's that you want to be able to respond. And what I call like the practical rewiring of trauma is, when you're dysregulated, how efficiently can you get yourself back to a regulated state? Because that's what we do have power over. We don't have power over the autonomic response of our nervous system responding to the threat. That's dependent on our past trauma. But where we do have power, which is what I really like to drive home for people, is in this piece of this practical rewiring of trauma. And so when you go into dysregulation, and this goes in line with a lot of the reparenting work, when you go into a dysregulated state, like, how would you treat your favorite little girl, your favorite little kid? Like, you're not going to shame them or be upset with them. However, when we begin the process of reparenting and regulation work, what can happen, it certainly happened with me, is that whenever I started to reparent, I would find myself frustrated, annoyed, and impatient. And I was like, why is this happening? And then I realized, when someone asked me, write down the qualities of your parents, your parents, your parenting, your dad's parenting, your mom's parenting. Frustration, annoyance, and impatience is what I got. And so when I went to reparent my little girl, it was like those characteristics showing up. And so it was like a big aha for me of like, oh, I'm repeating what I was modeled. And so really, when you go into dysregulated states, you're learning that this is what's happening. You're learning to watch what's happening in your nervous system, but you are developing this witness consciousness, right? And this connection to your higher self and your healthy adult that can hold, those big emotions. And this is part of developing the divine masculine within us, is how can you hold, create a structure so that it holds this little one, in a way that she can experience, these big emotions without feeling wrong for them, because most of the time as a kid, we were made wrong for feeling what we feel. So I think above anything else is, when you feel what you feel, don't make yourself wrong for it, and just like it's holding and being able to, it's a process, but learning to hold and empower yourself at the very deepest level, and which I really believe that this is what this work does.
Beautiful. Thank you all for, no bad feelings, Heidi. Thank you all for sharing. Thank you all for being here. This was such a powerful panel with so much wisdom. So thank you. And And yeah, we're gonna share the link again in the chat so everybody can go ahead and look at all that. And we're starting Shake Rising with Sarah next. So thank you. Bye, everyone. And hello, Sarah.